We call it people technology.
Well, that was different, at least different from what we're used to expecting at Sharjah. In the second leg of the IPL is the highest score, batting first at the Sharjah Cricket Stadium in this leg of the IPL. 164 for 7 for RCB after they surprised us, wanting to bat first after Virat Kohli won the toss. This is Maruti Suzuki presents ESPN Cricket for T20 timeout with Sanjay Manjrekar and Carlos Brathwaite. Now let's go to Carlos first up and figure out whether this is different from those other Sharjah games that he's just about managed to watch in the early hours of the morning in Barbados.
Yeah, this is exciting, man. And you must give credit to Kohli, a brave decision to bat first against the grain, against all odds, and then to put up 164. I think it's the manner in which they did it as well. They played well in the power play. And one of the issues that we addressed on here in one of the previous games is how they slowed down in the middle. They tried to counteract that with Dan Christian going at three. Um, I don't know, some people might like it, some people may not, but I think someone who addressed a deficiency and you tried to make amends for it, I would say it just didn't work. Obviously, you got one ball, but I love the thinking to send Christian up the order and tell him, have a go. You could have easily gotten 30 or 15 and you could have been looking at a 180, 185 on what has been a subpar Sharjah track.
Is this a different track, Sanjay, from the other games that we've seen?
It was a strange innings, so we'll know only when the other team has batted on it, and it might turn out to be a really good decision by Virat Kohli. The batting, the second team that bats here on this pitch really struggles with the pitch, where there's more on offer to their spinners, and whether it becomes really difficult to play shots because you saw, Moses Hendricks have an economy rate of 3. Then you had Markram bowling 1 over for 5 runs. Brar had a very tight sort of 4 over. There was 1 over that was expensive. So when you look at the economy rates, there are 2 guys who have gone at 5 and 3, and then a couple of guys who've gone for big runs. So I didn't know what to make out from all that. Maybe it's just the Maxwell effect, where you mentioned at the start, it takes the pitch out of the equation. So we'll have to wait and see how Punjab Kings bat and how they find the pitch is more importantly.
Okay, fair enough. So let's just talk about individual efforts in this first innings. And Maxwell, the Glenn Maxwell effect, 350s on the trot, perhaps aiming for his best ever IPL, Carlos Brathwaite, and did it again today. Some consistency this from Glenn Maxwell.
Yeah, and his consistency in where he's batting as well, not only at number 4, but the amount of overs he has to face. I think he was not off 3 or 4 balls, something like that. If you're batting not off 4 balls in the 18th over, all of a sudden you play a judicious shot and you're gone, you make one or you're gone for a duck. Whereas in this case, he was able to hit the ball to the sweeper, be 1 off 5 or something like that, and still have the whole innings before you. And then when you can change it from those 5 balls and end up scoring 50 off 20 odd. It shows you the class and the quality of the man. And I think, as I said earlier on one of the previous episodes, the fact that he's been given some consistency in roles and some consistency in responsibility is a pleasure to see that obviously he's come up trumps with the bat, but also the management are being repaid for the faith in him.
What's been most impressive about this Glenn Maxwell, Sanjay? We always knew about the talent. We were wondering to see if we'll ever see the consistency we saw in half a leg of 2014. That seems like a lifetime back. What stands about this Glenn Maxwell?
Yeah, I think we've got to really enjoy this Maxwell because we don't get to see this kind of a Maxwell very often. But again, today's innings, when you see that the others were struggling a bit, there was hardly any momentum to this innings, and he comes and he sets his own standards. He completely sort of changes the whole complexion of the game. It's just an individual thing. He's not feeding off anything else. So he's setting his own tone while the rest are playing a completely different ball game. Good to see AB de Villiers towards the end get some runs. But really, if I have to pick out one thing that I have noticed today, he went after 3 bowlers who have been so good for Punjab Kings. I was just looking at, his economy rate or his strike rate against bowlers, and who were the pick of the bowlers for Punjab Kings. There was Arjdeep Singh, and he had a strike rate of 233 against him. Bishnoi, who's been phenomenal strike rate of 275. So we went after the best bowlers because the opposition tend to bowl their best bowlers to Maxwell. And spin or pace, it doesn't worry this foreign player, which is brilliant, which is where it is dangerous. And one reverse kind of left-handed switch hit that he played against Bishnoi just shows how tough a batter he is to bowl to when it's on song.
Yeah, and he was very happy to even identify for his partner for the cameras that he's picking Bishnoi's googlies. He has been presented with that question for Australian press conference. Oh, what is your issues against leg spin? And I remember Glenn Maxwell is very colourful language said, "What? I don't have any issues against leg spin." But Carlos, if we just look at Maxwell, the six hitter, I'd love for you to tell me if there's something which is unique about him from a pure, layman's perspective of viewer. You just feel there's something very enjoyable to watch Glenn Maxwell when he just with that bat swing of his, which takes the ball, a long, long way. I'm told he's a very good golfer. I can almost see that. There are many ways to hit sixes. How does Glenn Maxwell hit them that makes it enjoyable?
But the way that I see it, or the way that I would pick his game down is that with a lot of the power players, most of the way to go into the ball, it seems as though Glenn Maxwell is back and allowing his quick hands, which I think is his best asset, to react and to come through the path of the ball. So if you think about it, off the pacer is one of the hardest balls to hit for power hitters, is that ball into the hip. Whereas for Glenn Maxwell, because his weight is back and his hands are quick, even that ball he can pick up square or over backward or square. And then for the spin, he's become a lot harder to bowl to because he's not getting bogged down with that ball back of a length. He's now rocking back and using those quick hands to hit either between deep backward square and deep mid wicket, or in some instances, and most instances recently, over the boundary. So I think he has a very good balance. I think he had a funny looking setup last year where it seemed as though his body wasn't in sync with his hands. I think now he has the perfect balance between a wide base or wide enough base for his height, and then where his balance is, allowing him to strike the ball with quick hands and access different areas to traditional power players.
Hmm. I tell you what, there are a few in that Punjab Kings dressing room that will be peculiarly unhappy watching this innings from Glenn Maxwell. They waited and paid so much money for quite a few years to see it happen for them. It did happen. But let's talk a little bit about Punjab's bowling. Could there have been altercations or alterations to the way that they bowled, Sanjay? We keep talking about the lengths you bowl at Sharjah, whether you bowl into the pitch, whether you toss it up. And we're seeing Moses Hendricks almost unplayable, and Arshdeep and Mohammad Shami, even Vishnoi taken to the cleanest on some occasions.
I thought Harpreet Brar bowled superbly. There could have been an over where he also was taken to the cleaners. Arshdeep Singh was, I think, today caught in sort of mid territory. The balls that were full weren't full enough, and I thought slightly below par, which can happen. We looked at all his bowling figures this season, and he hasn't had a night like this. Perhaps it was inevitable in a long season to have an afternoon like this, not a night. But nothing really that you could pick out from. I think it's just the Maxwell, effect on bowlers. And Moses Enriquez bowled it slowly. He's great for the over rate as well. The way he bowls. But if I have to pick out any flaws, hard to pick out anything because it was just Maxwell there doing all the stuff that he did. Because these are bowlers in good form, Bishno as well. Just what Maxwell does.
Hmm. Did you go with that, Carlos? Just at the receiving end of a fine batter in form, or could Punjab have bowled any better?
Yeah, I think firstly, obviously they're not sure about that fifth bowler option. I think that's why Markham would have bowled the first over. But then you had your fifth bowler actually coming and being the best bowler in Moises Enriquez. So at that point in time, when you bowl first, you never quite know what the wicket will give. But after you see Moses with the success he's had bowling slow and into the wicket, I probably have liked to see them try that for a bit longer as opposed to going death as quickly as they did, because once they went death and they missed the line, Maxwell was set. The ball was always going to disappear. Um, but as Sanjay said, you could always nitpick about a boundary here, a boundary there. Sometimes you just hold your hand up and say well played, especially on what looks a little better of a Sharjah pitch, to be fair to it, in comparison to the ones we've had before, but still not the traditional 190, 200 Sharjah pitches that we've become accustomed to. So for Maxwell to come out there and play that knock and take the bowlers on the way that he did, sometimes you just say well played to him and you look into your dressing room and you hope that yourself or one of your teammates could put in a similar, if not a better performance to get you over the line.
Hmm. Can't go too long in the IPL before we bring up one umpiring error or incident or the other. So let's go to this one. TV umpire early on in the innings sees a spike, which all or doesn't see a spike, which all of us see. Sanjay Manjrekar, how would you have adjudicated it?
Only one way, like the other day with Dandekar. So it was Dandekar a couple of nights back, and now Srinivasan. Clearly, from both the front on and the side, you could see that it was out. I mean, and you had to feel for Ananta Padmanabhan on field, who was not sure, went upstairs, and then you could see that because he's the most
Yeah,
senior umpire. He's a former cricketer with a great first-class record. He used to be
yeah.
a leg spinner. So yeah, unfortunate. And again, I think this could be a season where the IPL governing council realizes that they need to train the umpires better. The umpires on the field aren't doing a bad job. I think there's some training needed to read replays and the television monitor when making these kind of decisions.
It's not a new problem for the Indian cricket or the IPL, isn't it, Carlos? You come as an overseas player, been part of the IPL. It's a world class league in so many fronts, a league like no other, but somehow the umpiring gets in the way of it, fitting high class or world class standards.
Well, to be honest, the umpiring around the world has been under the microscope for a bit. It's not an easy job. Um, and in a situation like what happened today, I could not blame the on-field umpire at all. It doesn't seem as though he would have
Of
heard
course.
anything. You can't
True.
see any deviation. But when you're sitting at the monitor looking at it and you see such a clear spike, that's when it comes under the microscope because your job is to adjudicate what you see. And if you see a spike, you give it out. If the batsman says he didn't touch it and it's a bird passing by or something, then you can't do anything. You could only read what you see on the screen. But it's when clear errors that are made that the umpiring comes on the microscope. I don't think anyone would point fingers at the on-field because you can see when the
Of
ball
course.
would have passed the glove, the bat would have been blocking and the hand would have been blocking the umpire's view, and it was difficult. But you want the TV umpire to bail the standing umpire out as much as he could, and he didn't do that today. So, yeah, I mean, it's a tough job, and I hold my hands up for umpires. Even when we in the practice nets, I would try to stand up, and I understand how difficult it is to look at the no ball crease and then look up and make a decision at 140 k's an hour. And I have sympathy for them, but for decisions like this, you just have to get them right if you can watch it back in slow mo.
Absolutely.
Ronak, I'd
Nothing
love
against.
to get his version actually because it's going to be
Hmm.
really interesting as to why he thought that there was no nick. Be
He just
interesting to
didn't
know
see it.
because it was
And
all
it,
very
So
obvious.
I'm only going to
and
speculate
that
because it's a glove. It's a glove and no bat. That the spike isn't prominent, but then that's exactly what the technology is supposed to train the umpire for. That there are different ways in which you can adjudicate or see a spike. So clearly, this is an umpire that's not well versed with the
That has
protocols
to
when
be
it
the
comes to seeing the
only
umpire.
thing, right? He may have thought that the tremor on that
Yeah,
line wasn't spiky enough for him.
yeah,
So,
but that's where I
and
believe they're trained. Yes, Carlos,
Carlos, yeah.
please.
and run up. That's something that I would like to see come into the game a bit, where umpires give a reason for their decision because sometimes they can make the it's almost like mathematics, and I am not a scholar by any stretch of the imagination, but you can do the correct working um, for a mathematics equation
Mm.
and for some reason make a mistake in one facet and get the wrong answer, but you can see that the working is right or you were going along the right line. So umpire can make a bad decision, but if he has a good reason for it, like sometimes you see the ball hitting both pads, and an umpire might say, "Oh, I thought I heard a nick," and you can watch the replay and see that the bat was fairly close to the ball. It hit both pads, which should have given the sound of two noises, and as a result of that, the umpire said not out. Now that's an error, yes, but it's an error that has a proper reason for it. So I think if umpires can divulge. I don't know if it will be right away. I don't know if it'll be after the game, same way players have to answer for certain things. What was the decision making behind X error or Y error or X decision and Y decision? Um, then it'd be good to know. Even some of the great decisions, we want to know what was your thought process.
Mm, mm.
Sometimes you bowl it over the wicket to a left-hander. It was hitting, but I didn't think that it pitched in line because it was shorter instead of fuller. All those sort of things can help umpires in the future, and it can help your peers as well. So I love to get the thought process behind certain decisions, good or bad.
Hmm. Like it. I don't mind it. But this is one of the pet peeves of mine. You know that, Sanjay. And the fact that they give the umpires, they broadcast their communication in cricket now is perhaps a step in that direction. Let's see reasoning. Let's hear reasoning
Did
and
you hear
transfer.
Ron's explanation
Yes,
of Srinivasan? Was it the third umpire? He
yes,
was half the
yeah.
bird.
So that's the thing. You can give him the microphone, and yet if he says there's no spike, what do you do? You are like Anand Padmanabhan and Vipul Ellingworth in that situation, going, okay, we
Mm,
can't really do anything. The laws have tied our hands. So anyway, this is a debate that'll
mm.
never end. 165 to get for Punjab. Now, his innings is already underway. It's a really important game from them. Only one question, and it's not a prediction, Sanjay. It's an assessment. How should KL Rahul bat?
So it's an interesting innings that RCB played because there were 9 overs that went for 43, and the rest was scored off exactly like how it happened with CSK. The first 11 overs or 10 overs, that's just about going at 7-8 runs an over, and then mayhem happened later. Uh, I don't think Carlos actually has made it very simple for me and for all the fans that if he wants to anchor the innings, he has to ensure that the progression happens from 120 to 130, 135, and then culminate to 150. It can't be at 125 right into the final few overs.
All right, Carlos Brathwaite, give me the prediction now, so we all know which way it's going.
The pressure was off. The pressure was off when it was getting all around. But now I've gotten the few right. The pressure back on again. um, it looks a better track, but I'll still say RCB.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Sanjay Manjrekar, Carlos Brathwaite. We shall pick up the chat at the end of the game. Join us then on Maruti Suzuki presents ESPN Cricket for T20 timeout. Again, it's a massive 2 points for Punjab. Otherwise, they leave it in the hands of other teams too. So let's see if they can pick up the points against Bangalore.
We call it people technology.